Coming up on Network Africa, at least 180 bodies found in mass graves in Djibo, northern Burkina Faso. Amnesty International urges Tanzania to drop charges against comedian jailed for laughing at a picture of President John Magufuli. Plus, Kenyan schools told to refund 2020 fees due to COVID-19 pandemic. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin today in Burkina Faso, where the bodies of at least 180 men have been found in mass graves in the north of the country. According to a report by Human Rights Watch, the graves were found in a region where government forces are fighting a jihadist insurgency. The men had been reportedly buried under bridges, in fields, and along major roads near the town of Djibo in groups of up to 20. Human Rights Watch says there is evidence they were victims of extrajudicial killings by the army, urging the government to find out who turned the area into what it calls a killing field. Defense Minister Mumina Sharif suggested militant groups wearing stolen army uniforms might be to blame, saying they will investigate the claims. Well, another human rights campaign group, Amnesty International, is asking Tanzania to drop charges against the comedian linked to a viral social media post 2 months ago. The comedian and reality TV star Idris Sultan was arrested in May after he posted a video on social media of himself laughing at an old photo of President John Magufuli wearing an oversized suit. The police then questioned him for allegedly violating the country's controversial Cybercrimes Act. The comedian is set to be arraigned in court a second time on Thursday for failure to register a SIM card previously owned by another person and failure to report change of ownership of a SIM card. Well, the death toll from demonstrations and ethnic violence that erupted in Ethiopia last week following the murder of popular singer has risen to 239. Pop star Hachalu Hundessa, a hero to many Oromo who saw him as the voice of their marginalization, was shot dead by unknown attackers in June, heightening the ethnic tensions threatening the country's democratic transition. Protests broke out in the capital, Addis Ababa, as well as the surrounding Oromia region, which is the homeland to the country's largest ethnic group, who have long felt economically and politically sidelined in the diverse nation. Officials have attributed the deaths of a combination of lethal force by security officers and inter-ethnic violence. Police in Addis had previously reported 10 deaths in the capital. The total death toll now is an increase from 166 fatalities reported last weekend. Well, let's turn our attention now to the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa has recorded 508,710 coronavirus cases. Of that figure, 245,833 people have recovered, while 11,989 people have died. The country with the highest confirmed cases on the continent is South Africa, with 215,855, followed by Egypt, which has recorded 279 cases, I beg your pardon. Nigeria in West Africa has the third highest cases on the continent with 29,789. Ghana follows with 21,968 and Algeria 16,879. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are South Africa, Egypt, Algeria, Nigeria, and Sudan. In East Africa, Kenya, their education minister says schools should either refund the parents the school fees paid for this academic year or agree to forward it to next year amid the coronavirus pandemic. The Minister, George Magoha, was responding to concerns raised after his Tuesday announcement that Kenya's primary and secondary schools would not reopen until 2021. The ministry said all students will resume studies in their current classes. Those in their final years will not sit for this year's national examinations. Parents had expressed concerns over school fees paid for this year. The students only studied in January and February before schools were closed in March after the first coronavirus cases were recorded. We have joining us now for more on the situation in Kenya is KTN journalist Abby Agino. He joins us now from Nairobi. Hello, Abby. Thank you for speaking to us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let me begin by asking, with the situation regarding school fees, how are education bodies reacting to the minister telling the schools to refund 2020 fees, and how likely is this to go ahead?
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. And it's a very interesting time for the education sector in Kenya, where we are seeing a sort of a limbo that has hit the education industry. Well, on one hand, the government is indicating that they want refunds to be given to parents. On the other hand, the institutions of learning have been paying teachers ever since the lockdown measures were put in place in the country. This is beginning of April. So the school administrations have maintained their ground, saying they might be unable to make refunds to parents. And it's an ongoing matter that they continue to consult. And it's too early to actually make a final determination of how things will pan out. But clearly, parents might be having to wait a bit longer for them to receive the refunds from their school administration.
But according to the minister, schools are not likely to resume till next year, primary and secondary schools. What does this mean for students? Are schools introducing a more rigid form of online learning during this time?
Well, clearly it is anticipated that many of the schools in the country, especially the private schools, they'll be taking up a lot of digital learning for their learners at home. And it will be a time when schools will have to invest heavily in ICT, where we've seen a number of schools already indicating that they'll be going heavy on online classes. That will see them being able to continue with the curriculum. Whereas on the public schools front, we don't expect any learning to progress until 2021 in January. Well, that is the situation. And remember, most of the schools that have employed teachers are actually now trying to hone their skills on issues of e-learning, because this is the new normal and schools must adapt. Schools must be able to try and fit into this new normal by ensuring that they have online classes just to keep the learners on top of their game. At the same time, it's a battle for survival for most of the schools, because if you don't have classes, what do you say to parents to compel them to pay for the school fees? So it's a very dicey situation. Things are very fluid right now for many of the schools, as they go to the drawing board just to see how do we maneuver through these uncertain times of the COVID-19.
All right, let's move on to the Saba protest that happened yesterday. What more do we know at the moment, especially of the number of people that were arrested?
Well, the number of people that were arrested is still unclear. We know several people were rounded up. This include prominent lawyers, human rights activists that were, of course, taken into police custody following the protests that happened in the city yesterday in Nairobi. Well, the Saba protests are an annual sort of traditional, should I say, what normally happens, especially on that day. Kenyans mark a very emotive day for the political history of the country when you look at the journey the country has taken towards democracy. So I cannot give you a number as of now, but we do know over 7 people have actually been arrested, and we don't still know what charges will be preferred upon them, but we continue to monitor this situation.
Yeah, and the demonstrations were an anti-police brutality protest, and these accusations against the police has actually been mounting up for a while now, especially during the COVID-19 lockdown. What has the government had to say? Are there plans to investigate the deaths that have, occurred?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very good question you bring up. The police has been accused years upon years of using excess force when it comes to arresting people, quelling protests, and they have been on the receiving end when it comes to them actually being accused of human rights injustices. Well, there are cases that have been able to be prosecuted before court, and clearly, when the country did implement a lockdown here in Kenya, the curfew, actually, to beg your pardon, we did see a lot of police brutality in some parts of the country, especially in coastal Kenya, that is in the city of Mombasa. So the police are trying their very best to transform the police force to a service that will see service to the people. But many of the pundits here say it's still a long way coming, with the police reforms not taking full effect.
All right, then, Abi Agina, thank you so much for speaking to us. Abi Agina there is a KTN journalist from Nairobi. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
Well, over in neighboring Uganda, motorcycle taxi operators have sued the government for denying them permission to carry passengers amid the pandemic. The Riders Association says the government is discriminating against their business and allowing every other business to operate with regulations. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni allowed public transport to carry passengers at half capacity to ensure social distancing. He, however, said it would be premature to allow the motorcycle taxis known as border borders, saying there was barely any distance between passengers and the riders. The UN Refugee Agency says thousands of people fleeing murderous attacks in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo have crossed into neighboring Uganda. The development comes amid intensifying violence attributed to the Allied Democratic Forces, ADF, in the last 18 months, particularly in Ituri province, as well as deadly intercommunal violence involving Hema and Lendu people. The ADF attacks have left more than 793 people dead and dozens of others injured. Well, over 600 shops belonging to Nigerian traders in Ghana have been opened to business by the Ghanaian government. The president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders, Dr. Ken Ukaoha, disclosed this on a solidarity visit to the chairman of NIDCOM, Honorable Abike Dabiri Erewa, in Abuja. Dr. Ukaoha stated that the visit is to commend and appreciate NIDCOM for its efforts in resolving the lockdown of Nigerian shops in Ghana for over 6 months. He believes that ECOWAS protocol of free movement of persons, goods and services shouldn't be observed in breach, but rather be observed in the spirit of brotherhood and diplomatic reciprocity. In the same vein, Mrs. Dabiri Erewa thanked the National Association of Nigerian Traders for appreciating NIDCOM's role. You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Still ahead on the program. Zimbabwe's Health Minister Obadiah Moyo sacked amid a graft scandal. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program. Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has fired his health minister Obadiah Moyo for inappropriate conduct. This comes after he was charged with corruption over illegally awarding a multi-million-dollar contract for medical equipment. Mr. Moyo was arrested last month following an investigation by the country's Anti-Graft Commission. The 66-year-old is now free on bail, but is scheduled to appear in court on the 31st of July. If convicted, the former hospital administrator faces a fine or up to 15 years in prison. This week, Burkina Faso concluded a 4-day mass polio immunization campaign, vaccinating over 174,000 children under 5 years of age in 2 districts of the country's center-east region amid this COVID-19 pandemic. The campaign is the first to be conducted since the government suspended all mass immunization on March 27th so as to comply with the physical distancing guidelines. As immunization campaigns resume, the World Health Organization teams, both at regional and country offices, have developed guidelines for countries and frontline workers to ensure their safety and that of the children and their families. Burkina Faso received its wild polio virus-free status in 2015, yet is currently one of 15 countries in the African region which are experiencing outbreaks of circulating vaccine-derived polio virus. It's a rare form of the virus that affects unimmunized and under-immunized populations living in areas with inadequate sanitation. Well, Dr. Pascal Makande is the coordinator of the WHO polio eradication program in the African region. He joins us now from Congo, Brazzaville. Thank you so much for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you.
No doubt the COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted a lot of things worldwide, including in Burkina Faso. Mass immunizations were suspended because of the COVID-19 pandemic. What impact did this have?
So thank you very much. So indeed, because of the COVID pandemic, we suspended the immunization activities in response to CVDPV or circulating vaccine-derived poliovirus outbreaks in the African region. That meant that we had to postpone from reaching about 12 million children under 5 across 14 countries then. But because we had suspended this, we know that we have not protected the children, and therefore there's a risk that the disease could continue spreading in these countries where we postponed these activities. I would like to mention that the polio eradication program is also a public health emergency. And looking at the way the COVID-19 is continuing to spread, it'll be very difficult for us to wait until when the COVID-19 pandemic is over, because that means risking a lot of children from getting paralyzed. So we know what is supposed to be done during the COVID response for us to do some activities, as you mentioned, issues of social distancing, hygiene, and ensuring that we give the messages to protect the further spread of COVID while we're immunizing children to stop any circulating vaccine-derived polio virus outbreaks.
So what other measures are in place to avoiding the spread of COVID-19? Like you mentioned, polio indeed is a public health emergency. Since the vaccinations have resumed, what other measures are in place?
So the measures which we have in place is to protect both the vaccinators and as well as the children and the households. So starting with the vaccinators, we have to ensure that they have the personal protective equipment, so masks, ensuring that they have gloves, and ensure that they'll have also sanitizer so that they can be washing their hands or trying to sanitize their hands where there's no water. And for the children, what we ensure is that there's not much contact when administering the vaccine. We also ensure that the droppers which you use do not touch the lips or the mouth of the children, and we ensure that the children are the mothers are the ones who are presenting the children for vaccination. So we're protecting both the vaccinators, but also the children we are targeting. And also to mention that we're using these response campaigns for us to educate households on how to prevent COVID-19. So showing them how to wash hands properly, if they're coughing, how to ensure that they're covering their mouths. So also trying to use this to really see how we can assist in the response to COVID.
And what are the plans for the resumption of immunization campaigns in other African countries? Are there more countries to follow in Burkina Faso's steps in resuming immunization activities?
Yes, that's very correct. We have about 13 countries which intend to start these campaigns this month and next month. Angola will be next. We think Angola will be starting this weekend. And then after that, we have some other 11 countries which are planning to start in July and August. I would like to mention that we have really to start doing these activities because, as I mentioned, when we postponed the activities, we know that the children are being unprotected. And that means that the virus could be spreading even to more districts, more countries. And what we try to do is to have a more aggressive response. So I mentioned that there were about 10 to 12 million children who we planned to reach that time in March, but we did not. Our target now has increased because of the fear that the disease has spread a bit further than what we thought. So we think when the 13 countries, when we start, we should be targeting close to 32 million children in the 13 countries.
All right, then Dr. Pascal Makande, coordinator of the WHO Polio Eradication Program in the African region. Thank you very much for speaking to us on our program.
Thank you, you're welcome.
As hospitals in Cairo are overflowing and doctors struggling with the coronavirus, the frontline workers also, one woman has decided to start a catering campaign that cooks healthy meals to medical staff. Volunteers collaborate and rent out kitchens to prepare and deliver food to the frontline workers who are struggling with the pandemic in Egypt.
Egyptian chef and founder of the We Are With You campaign, Nagwa Fathi says her initiative was born out of empathy for doctors.
I got this idea out of empathy for doctors. They are some of the most exhausted people at the moment. This is a way for us to support them. I focus on proteins, vegetables, honey, and oranges, everything that has vitamins. That is because the meal offered is not just food, it is a meal of thanks and happiness.
Fathi's campaign, which began in mid-February, is not only about food delivery, but is focused on boosting doctors' immunity by preparing healthy meals rich in nutrients. Most of the campaign's volunteers are chefs by profession, but others are also welcome to join the effort. A nutritional specialist and volunteer, Mahmoud Yusuf, says his role is centered around disinfecting everything.
I have a lot of experience in nutrition. I decided to reach out to the campaign We Are With You, saying that I can be responsible for the sanitization of the meals being prepared. We disinfect the vegetables, the raw materials, hands, knives, disinfect everything we use.
Since mid-February, the We Are With You campaign delivered around 16,000 free meals to 3 hospitals treating patients battling COVID-19. They currently prepare between 350 and 500 meals per day. Doctors and medical staff in Egypt have complained about the increased pressure and lack of resources at hospitals as cases of COVID-19 continue to rise, more than 1,000 new infections per day.
Eat healthy and stay safe. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.